We just wanted to hold a webinar with you all just to run through the performance management aspects on PCSE Online. We just ask that you have the chat open so you can post any questions as and when you think of them. If you do see a question that's already been asked that you'd also like an answer to, please pop a like on that question and we'll try and get that prioritised for you. We just ask as well that you try and keep the questions related to perform list approvals and things like that, because that's the scope of the webinar today. So just to also advise that any data that you do see on screen, it has just been created for demonstration purposes, so we won't be using any live data whilst on the session. And just to let you know that we are recording today's session and we will make this available on our YouTube channel. And we are aiming to send that out to you possibly next week when we've done some edits. So keep an eye out for that. And we also want to try and make the session interactive. So we have created some live polls. Now, the reason why we're doing this is we just want to make sure that obviously we can see what you're getting from the session, and it also helps us understand if the session's been useful and if you've been able to obviously get some information from it and learn something on the day. And at the end, we will also give you an opportunity to provide feedback. So yeah, let's make a start. So during today's webinar, I'll run through some introductions. So you'll first know who we've got on the call. We've got some perform list members of staff in the chat on hand to answer your questions. And then I'm going to run through the perform list process just to give you a high level overview of, just to try and explain the GP journey so you can understand where your part comes into it, and just to explain the importance of what you do at the practice and the knock-on effect that it has down the lane for the GP. So we'll then have a look at PCSE Online, and we'll first discuss the user management aspects of PCSE Online. So that's things like making sure that you've got the right roles at the practice, making sure that you've got people that can assign those roles, and what you're able to do with the roles that you've been given, and what happens if you don't have those roles as well. We'll also look at the perform list management approvals, so what it looks like in PCSE Online for you as a practice, and I'll also quickly run through how you action an approval, whether you approve a request or whether you reject a request. I'll show you all the screens that you're going to see. We're also going to have a quick look at how you add a non-GP partner to the practice. It's going to be a quick high-level overview, just to explain how you give them the role in PCSE Online. And then we're going to have a look at the pension side of things and how the performer list side of things links in with the joiners and leavers. I've booked the session in for an hour. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think it's going to take a full hour. So hopefully we will have time for questions at the end. And we'll also hopefully have a bit of time at the end for some feedback too. Okay, so I'll just run through some introductions of who we've got on the call today. So obviously myself, Debbie Roberts, and I've got my colleague Kat helping in the background, and we are on the communications team at PCSE. We've got Vanessa Morrison, who's our senior business analyst, who's kindly going to run through some of the pension aspects through the PCSE Online. And we've got Maria Lunat, who's our subject matter expert for everything performer list. And we've also got Julie, who's our senior case handler for performer management. And we've got the team leader for the performer list team. And we've got Tracy Cascarino, who's our operations manager for performer list. So we've got lots of knowledge in the background. We will try and answer as many questions as we can, but please do understand that we can't always answer all questions whilst on the call, and anything that we can't answer, we'll take away and try and get those, and we'll try and get a written answer for you, and we'll send that out in a follow-up email. So before I run through the first part of the presentation, we just want to get you involved. So we want to just provide you a live poll. We really just want to know your current understanding of user management in PCSE Online. I can see lots of people are using that, so that's great. So we've got a bit of a mixed understanding, which is quite positive, because if some of you already know how to use PCSE Online, then that's really good. Got a lot in the middle. So, I mean, The way I'm going to run the session is I'm going to act as though you know nothing at all. If I run through something and you understand it perfectly, then that's brilliant. You understand it and I've done my job properly. Cool. We don't have any fives, which is fine, which is good, which means obviously the session is useful. So yeah, I will make a start. Okay, so in order for anybody at the practice to approve a performance change that comes through to the practice, you will need to have the PL practice manager role. Now, it's super important that you have this role at the practice, because if nobody at the practice has this role, this means that you won't have anybody to review, accept or reject a practice change that a GP submits. So whether they leave the practice, join the practice, change their status at the practice, if you don't have this role in PCSE Online, it's not going to get actioned and you're not going to see that approval come through. And obviously, if that doesn't get approved, then it has a knock-on effect with the pension, etc., etc. So it's super important to have that role. Now, in order to have that role, you'll need to have the PL organisation user administration role, and that person will need to assign that role to you. Okay. Now, the role that I just discussed that will assign the PL practice manager role is the PL organisation user administration. Now, the only thing that this role can do is create new users, deactivate existing users, and amend any existing users in PCSE Online. This role will not be able to accept or reject any approvals that come through from a GP. So if a GP leaves the practice, if you've only got somebody at the practice with this role, they're still not going to see that action come through. So it's essentially just going to be stuck, and that GP's action's not going to go anywhere. The system's not going to register that they've either left or joined the practice. So it's super important that you've got this role, and if you don't have the PR practice manager role, then this is the role that you need to assign the role to complete any approvals that come through. Now, if you find at the practice that you don't have the PL organisation user administration role, then you'll need to contact PCSE in order to have this. This is the email address that you need. Okay, so I'm now going to run through the process of how you create a new user in PCSE Online. So first off, what you would do is log into your PCSE Online account. And then, as you can see at the top there's a button that says User Management. If you click into that tab, you'll then see the lower option where you can create a new user. Once you click that, you'll then be able to enter all the details in there. Now, just a quick note, when you do click Create New User, it will ask if you're trying to include a GP at this point. So you'll just tick no to that you're adding a performer, because that's not the case at this point, okay? Once you've included all the details, click Create, and then you will get the option to add the role that you need. Now, as I've just discussed, if you need to add the role for somebody that's just going to be approving the performer list management approvals that come through, then you just tick the PL Practice Manager box as shown on the screen. But again, just make sure that when you are adding roles, as a PL user admin, as an administrator role, it is your responsibility to make sure that you are giving out the suitable permissions. So just make sure that you're only giving the roles that the people need at the practice. We strongly advise that you don't just tick every role that's available. If they're not completing that work at the practice, then don't give them that role. It's just that extra level of security for yourself at the practice. Okay, so you may also need to edit an existing user in PCSE Online. So again, you just log into your PCSE Online account and then click User Management. So anything user management that you need to do, if you need to add any users, amend any, it's all under the User Management tab on PCSE Online. Now, if you're editing a user, that means that user is already in PCSE Online. So you can either add the username or the surname or the forename, and you can just pop that into the Select User box and then click Apply, and then that should come up with that user's details. Now, you do also have the option of viewing everybody that's linked to your organisation. You just need to click the My Organisation Only box, and then that will give you the option to view everybody at your organisation. Okay, so looking at this part now then, so if you need to edit a user, you'll just obviously on this screen, it will, once you've included the name of the person that you want to edit and you've clicked apply, you'll see that it comes up with the username, the surname, forename, last time they've logged on, and whether their account's activated or deactivated. And then if you need to edit that user, just simply click edit user as shown in the bottom right hand corner. And then once you click that, obviously that's when you'll be able to edit any details in there. So if you need to change the name, say for example, if they've got married, something simple like that, this is where you'll do it. You can change the telephone number. And then if you move further down the screen, you'll see the option to add and remove various roles. But again, please just ensure that you're only issuing roles that they do need at the practice, okay? Once you've added any details that you needed to amend, you just simply click update, and then that will have updated your user. So I'm now going to just discuss how you deactivate users in PCSE Online. And before I do it, I just really want to stress how important this is, because obviously using PCSE Online, it's not a platform that's just available at the practice. Somebody could log on at home, you know, it's just a website that they can log into. So please just ensure that if somebody leaves your practice, that you do deactivate them as soon as possible. It may be as well that you have a member of staff that leaves, they may go to work at another practice, which means that they'll be using the same email address, especially if it's an NHS email address. If they're still a user at your practice, they may be able to still obviously access all the data that's at your practice. So it's just super important just to make sure that you do keep on top of removing access when required. So I'll just quickly show you how to do that. So again, really simple. You just click into your user management tab, and then you will click deactivate user as shown at the top. You can then enter I think you can put the first name, you can put the last name, you can put the email address or the username, and then simply just click deactivate user, and then that will confirm that your user has been deactivated. Now, if you find that you've deactivated a user in error, or say, for example, you've had a member of staff that's gone on maternity maybe, and you know that they're not going to be working for you for some time, so you can deactivate that user while they're not working, and when they come back to work, you can just simply search for the details and then reselect the role in the edit user section, and that will reactivate the user. And same again, if you've deactivated the wrong member of staff in error, you can just reactivate them by searching for them and just adding the required roles. Okay, so that's the user management side of things in PCSE Online. I hope you found that quite simple to understand. Now, my colleague's going to pop another poll in just to see whether what I have gone through has been helpful and it's helped you understand things a little bit more. I hope that is the case. Oh, I can see lots of 5s, so that's really good. That means that you understand things. If there is something that you're still not sure about, please do pop your queries in the chat. Obviously, like I say, we've got lots of people in the chat that's on hand won't be able to answer anything. And if we can't provide you an answer right now, we'll try and take that away for you and provide a written answer next week. Okie dokie. So what I wanted to do, so as I mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to run through basically the GP journey and what happens when a GP submits an employment change to PCSE. So an appointment change, it all starts with the GP. So if the GP is leaving your practice or if they want to join the practice, they may be changing role at the practice. So they may be a salaried GP moving to a partner. They may want to submit a retirement. They might want to submit a resignation or a 24-hour retirement, something like that. It all starts with the GP. So they'll log on to PCSE Online and they'll submit the change. Once they've submitted the change, that then comes through to PCSE. And then we do various checks, and then what we do is assign the case. Now, one of the checks that we do is have a look if the practice has got the correct roles and things in place. So obviously this is where we've identified that we may have needed this webinar, because we have noticed that some practices don't have the correct roles set up for practice approvals. So this is why it's super important for you to just make sure that all your roles are up to date and you do actually have people in place and set up the practice to be able to actually perform list approvals. Now, let's just go down the happy path. So a GP is joining your practice, he's logged into PCSE Online, submitted it through, PCSE have received it, we've had a look, yeah, everything's fine. So we've assigned that case to one of the PCSE case officers. What happens then is our system will automatically ping a task over to the practice that they're joining or leaving, obviously, but in this example, they're joining your practice. You will then see in your queue the request from the GP. So the PL practice manager will get that task, and that's when you will then have the option to either approve or reject that change. Now, depending on what kind of request the GP's asked, if it's a salaried GP, the practice will approve the change, and then that will come directly to PCSE, and then we will just action the request as per our work instructions. If it's a partner that's joining the practice, so there's a contract change, once the practice have approved it, it will then ping over to the commissioner. So it'll be down to the ICB to then approve the case. Now, this is kind of what happens sometimes. So obviously, if a practice doesn't have the role set up properly at the practice, and it's a partner that's trying to join, then the ICB can't approve that case until it's been approved by the practice. So again, just another reason why it's super important just to make sure that your roles are in place so we can action the request for the GP as quickly as possible and move it down the required steps that it needs to take. So I'm not going to run through the full journey at this point because I'm now going to run through how you action the request in PCSE Online. I will be going back to this though, just to make reference to it, just so you can try and visualize exactly how the process works. Okay, so just before I do go into the perform list approvals in PCSE Online, again, appreciate your involvement in this, but we're just going to ask you another poll just to see what your current understanding is about perform list approvals in PCSE Online. You know, please be honest. If you know it and you're confident, give us a 5, but if you don't, then just be honest and pop a 1 on there, or however you feel. That'd be great. Again, it looks like we've got a bit of a mixed bag, which is good. Hopefully you all understand it once I've gone through it with you. Let's make a start. So, to be honest, I personally think this process is quite easy. I could be biased because I work for PCSE and I obviously know the screens. So like I say, I'm going to just run through it step by step and just act as if you know nothing. So, as I've already discussed, a perform list approval in PCSE Online can only be actioned by anybody in the organisation that's got a PL practice manager role. So again, that's why we stress the importance of making sure that you've got a PL practice manager role in place. And again, I suppose it's a case of just being proactive. You know, if you've only got one person in the practice that manages the perform list approvals and they're going on holiday for 3 weeks, it might be worth just giving somebody temporary access just so they can action the approvals that come through. Obviously, that's down to you guys at the practice. It won't be down to us to advise that, but obviously just keep that in mind. If you don't have anybody with that role, that approval's not going to go anywhere, and essentially that GP's case is just stuck there, which could obviously then have a knock-on effect and affect the pension. So basically what will happen is if it's your responsibility to action perform list requests, you'll log into your PCSE Online account, and then you'll see below that you've got the perform list tile. You may have other tiles there depending on what other roles you do at the practice. You might have GPP payments, anything to do with pensions, but just for this demonstration, it's just got those ones on there. Okay, so your screen may look a little bit different to what this does. So you'll just click into the perform list tab, and then here you will see a list of changes that have been submitted. Now, on this example, there is just the one there. So you'll see the case reference number. So that's the case reference number that if you ever do need to contact PCSE about an employment change that you're not sure about, that's the case reference that you'll need to provide when you're completing the online contact us form. It'll provide the performer name, whether they're a principal or a salaried GP, and then under task, it will explain what the change is they're requesting. So as you can see here, it says change practice, losing practice. So that means that the GP is leaving your practice. So you'll find that the practice that they'll move into, they'll soon have the gaining practice task. And as you can see here, it says pending and it shows you the date that it was submitted. And then under action, that's where you are able to review the practice change. So if you just click review practice change, that will then bring up the details below, and it basically just confirms everything that was in the top tab: practice name, whether they're a salaried GP, the end date, so that's the date that they're leaving, and the performer name and the level of commitment. And then you just need to agree that you're happy with those and that is what's been agreed. And then you can either accept or reject the change. And then once that's done, you'll get a notification at the top right-hand corner just to confirm that that's been done and it's been saved. In this case, because it's a salaried GP, once you've accepted the request, that will then come back to PCSE and then we're able to continue with the process for the GP. If it was a partner or a principal, once you click accept, that request will then bounce through the ICB to the commissioner and then they'll be able to do their checks. And once approved, that will then come back to PCSE and then we can then obviously carry on with the requests. So it seems nice and simple. Like I say, it might be okay for me to say that because it's something that I've worked with for the past few years, but I think this is the last pulse, don't worry, it's not a webinar full of polls. So Kat, if you could just pop that in the chat for us. I just want to just see whether that's been helpful. And if it hasn't, if you do still have any questions, please do pop those in the chat and our experts in the background will try and get those answered for you. Lots of 5, so that's good. So a couple of 3s, not sure. But like I say, if you're not sure, don't sit there and not ask any questions. No questions a daft question. This is what the session's all about, making sure that you do understand what you need to do at the practice and things. So please do ask the questions while you can, while you've got us. We're slowing down with the answers there. So there was just something else that we wanted to run through while we had you on the webinar. We've been getting a lot of queries about it recently, about how to add a non-GP partner in PCSE Online, mainly because of the pension side of things. So we just wanted to run through quickly how you would do that. So if you do have a non-GP partner that joins your practice, it is the responsibility of the practice to include them onto PCSE Online. So it'd be the user administrator that will need to sign into PCSE Online and assign the non-GP partner this role. So the role is GPP-non-GP partner. So it will look like that in PCSE Online. So like I say, it is down to the practice just to make sure that the non-GP partner, bit of a tongue twister, has been included on PCSE Online and they've been given this role. Now, once they've been given this role, they will also need to complete the joiner process. So they'll need to make sure that that form's completed before they'll be able to do anything else. But whilst they'll have the role, they'll see certain tiles come on the PCSE Online account, but they won't actually be able to do anything with it. My colleague Vanessa will discuss this in a bit more detail when I hand over to her, but just to quickly show you what I mean by the joiner form. So once you've given them the role, this is the joiner form that you'll need to complete on their behalf, and just making sure that you click the non-GP option as shown on screen. It's got the red circle around it, and then obviously just complete all the other details in there that needs to be included. Once that has been completed, it will then open up various options for the non-GP partner. So they'll be able to complete and submit annual certificates. They'll be able to submit an annual certificate completed by the practice accountant. They'll be able to view previous annual certificates and complete individual estimated income. They'll be able to view ABC applications, complete payment details relating to ABC lump sum contributions. They'll be able to opt out or opt into the pension scheme. They'll be able to submit and view break in service applications, view employee contribution statements, and complete opt-outs on behalf of a performer or NCP. So, as discussed earlier, I said I was going to come back to this part of the screen. So, just jumping back to your standard employment change, as I went through the approval process, it would take us to the assigned point. So let's pretend that the GP submitted the practice change, come through to PCSE, we assigned it to yourself at the practice, you give it the thumbs up, you are the correct people at the practice to assign the role, you've clicked to approve, it's come back to PCSE, whether it's gone by the ICB or us, and it's been assigned. That's when it will then bounce back to yourself. And this is where you will need to complete a GP joiner in PCSE Online. It's super important to do that just to make sure that the correct deductions are taken from the practice and prescribing costs can be correctly assigned, and just to ensure that the GP appears on the practice status form. So GP joiners and leavers isn't my speciality, but I do have a colleague on that's going to run through a couple of bits and pieces with you today. Vanessa, have we got you on?
You are? Yeah, hi.
Good afternoon. How are you doing? You okay?
Good, thank you very much.
Good. Yeah, am I okay to hand it over to you, seeing as you're my expert in joiners and leavers in PCSE
Absolutely.
Online?
I mean, don't bring me up that much, but yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely fine. So hi everyone. Nice to meet you all. My name is Vanessa Morrison. I'm a senior business analyst with PCSE. And I was one of the business analysts that actually worked on Performers List when we first went live with it back in 2019. So before I start this, I do want to say I've been answering some questions in the chat and I will come back and answer some more questions. So in terms of joiners process, as Deb said, it's extremely important. At PCSE, one of the biggest queries that we get from performers and from practices is that they can see their pension going out on the payroll. They can see it leaving through the payslip that they may receive from the practice. But when they log into PCSE Online and they go to their pension contribution statement, there's a mismatch in those things. And sometimes that mismatch is because either a joiner hasn't been completed or we're deducting the pension at the wrong amount. And the joiner form is really key to getting that information correct. So with Performers List, as a performer joins the practice, they come all the way through the process and only at the point that they've been approved fully. So that approval may come, as Deb said, when she looked at that previous screen, she said it's when it shows as assigned and fully complete. So on our system, that has to be done in order for the joiner to be completed. Without that being done, if you tried to go in and then do a joiner, it would stop you from doing it because they're not showing as currently at your practice. So it's really important that all the performance management cases are completed beforehand. Once that's done, then as the practice, it's your responsibility to then go in and complete the joiner form. And in order to complete the joiner form, only a person with the role GPP, joiners and leavers, can go in and complete the form. You will then go to the joiner form. So I think, as you can see at the top there, it says home. Just under the PCSE Online, under the blue line, it says home, GP pensions, practice joiner entry form. That's the steps that you would lead. I think they call them breadcrumbs in the website that you will go through. So when you're on home, click on GP pensions, then click on practice joiner, then the joiner entry form. This is currently circled to non-GP. It's important that whoever you're joining, you tick the relevant box because then the system knows what it's looking for. If you tick non-GP, you could start typing the name because obviously a non-GP partner is not going to have a GMC number. So you'd start typing the name in and it will pre-populate with people at your surgery who've got the non-GP role and who are in your surgery. If you click on GP, you can enter in the GP's GMC number and it will bring up all the details. For both GP and non-GP partners, it's very important that they have an NHS pension scheme number. As you can see in the box here, down here, that's got to be populated with a number. That number is the only way that we can collect, at PCSE, is the only way that we can collect contributions from people. We need that number in order to be able to do that. And without it, we won't be able to do it. Now, if they don't have one, if they don't currently have one populated in there, you need to contact us and give us the SD number so that we can populate it into the system for you. So you'd do that. You'd contact the contact centre, provide the pension scheme number for the non-clinical partner or the GP, and we'll populate it into the system. Some of you may be aware that when we first went live with GP payments and pensions, we had that a lot. That's been fixed. That we've done a lot of work on getting that into a good level, so we don't have it as much now. But just know that if you're ever trying to do this without that pension scheme number, you won't be able to complete the form. So then you add all the details in and the relevant rate, and then you click submit, and that is the GP joiner done. What that means from both a GP and a non-GP partner is that you've enrolled them onto the pension scheme. So even though you may have been taking it from the payroll, it's now enrolled to us and we'll collect them contributions from the practice as we normally do. On the next side of the screen, what I'm showing you is how can you see who you've got at your current practice? How can you see what tier rate we collect at? So this is some really underused functionality in PCSE Online, and we have had some feedback that they're quite difficult to use sometimes, but it's actually the GP statements. On this time, you'll go into payments and into GP statements. And when you go in there, if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see there it says pension contributions. Now, I haven't added this down because when I've collected this, I've had to collect this from real data, hence the reason why there's lots of things blacked out. So I couldn't show you what it actually looks like. But for your practice, if you log into PCSE Online, go to payments and pensions, and then go to GPP statements, it will bring up your pension. Select a date range. It will bring up your statement, select a date range that you want to view, click submit, and it will show you your statements. It's the contractual statement that will show you your pension contributions. So as you can see there where we've circled, if you plus down on that, it will then list out all of your performers and non-GP partners at your practice. It will tell you how much contributions we've collected at PCSE. It will also tell you what tier rate we've collected them at. So that gives practices the opportunity to maybe audit and make sure that we're all collecting the same thing, but also see what performers you've got at your practice and what they're collecting, what we're collecting from you for those performers. Now, somebody did ask the question in the chat and say, is there another way that we can view performers at our practice? And at present, there isn't. So in PCSE and on our system, we see assignments attached to your surgery. That functionality isn't available yet for practices, but if they're a pension joiner, using the statements will allow you to see all the GPs and non-GP partners at your practice that have got a pension statement, that have on pensions and we're collecting contributions for. If there's any missing, so you go through that list and you see 5 GPs on there and you think, I've actually got 7 that I'm collecting pensions for, all you need to do is go back and do the joiner form. So when you go back and do the joiner form, put in the date that they joined, and that will go through, and then we will make the necessary adjustments to collect the pensions. If the joiner and the date between them joining, if a lot of time has passed, you will need to send a query to us to allow us to make the bigger adjustment for you. So you can do a joiner back to a certain date, but then if it's a longer period of time, because that joiner has not been done, you will need to query it with PCSE, and we will make the bigger adjustment. So I hope that's covered everything. I can see a lot of questions coming in, so we will be trying to go through these and answer more of these. Somebody just said, sorry, I'm lost. Where do we see a listing of them all? So just to make sure, so you can only see a listing of the GPs that are currently on the pension scheme in your practice. So in order to do that, log into PCSE Online, go to GP pensions and payments, go to GPP statements, select a time frame, a date range that you want to view, click view, and you're looking at contractual statements. When you're on contractual statements, if you look at this screen here on the left-hand side, right at the bottom there that's circled in red, it says pensions contributions. If you plus on that, it will show every GP and non-GP partner in your practice that we are collecting pensions contributions for. Anyone who doesn't have an option for GP statements, it means that you haven't got the necessary roles in PCSE Online. If you are the user administrator, you can provide yourselves with those roles by logging into user management and then going and giving yourself the necessary role, as Deb showed you at the start of the presentation. If you aren't the user manager, another user manager in your surgery will need to do that for you. But it's the role that you need is GP statements, GPP statements.
Yep. So we are on questions. So I can see a question. It says, how would you change a salaried GP to a partner at a practice and vice versa? So I think I'm right in saying that would be down to the GP to submit their own change. So somebody at the practice wouldn't actually be able to go in and do a change on behalf of a GP. The GP would need to go in and physically request their own employment change.
That's right, Debbie.
Yeah, I thought so. Thanks. I cannot deactivate users. I know I have not been set up as a practice manager, so I cannot seem to update any users or add any users. So if you are just a PL practice manager, you won't have the user management side of things. You need it's the administrators that can only amend roles on that one. So not everybody has the option to go in and start deactivating users. It is just the administrators that have got that responsibility. If you don't have your administrators set up at the practice and you feel that you need that role, please do contact us at PCSE and we'll look at getting those assigned to the practice. Like I say, it's super important that all the roles are up to date, because it'll just keep everybody on top of the approvals that come in, and essentially it doesn't cause any delays for the GP when they submit any requests. And also just being able to go in and deactivate users when you need to obviously stops any security risks if they leave, and because they can still access it from home. So yeah, if you do need to have the role of administrator, you'll need to email us.
So I've seen quite a few questions saying, how do we add GPs? How do we add salaried or partner GPs? So every performer that we've got in that we have listed has a login to PCSE Online. This was completed in 2019 when performers list went live. Now, the email address that we have for each performer was taken from the GMC. So those email addresses may be an NHS email address, but often are a personal email address. And that is because performers' access to PCSE Online is slightly different to a surgery access, in that the performer's access is their record. It's for their pension and their employment record. So they use whichever email address they registered with the GMC at the time. Every performer in 2019 will have been sent a link to say, here's your access to PCSE Online, and you need to verify your email address. We know that not all performers have verified their email address. We still monitor that at PCSE, but each performer does have a link. Now, we control the access in PCSE for the performers, in that the system automatically allocates the performers all the necessary roles to allow them to go in, view their pension contribution statements, submit their Type 1 and Type 2 forms, do their AVCs, ask for leave on their pension, complete performance management things. Everything is centrally controlled. And so the practice doesn't need to do anything with the performers. They will not show on your practice as PCSE Online users. They are held as organisation agnostic, really. They don't have an organisation that they belong to, and that's because a performer can move and move and move, but they always need to be able to view their pension. Their assignments are then held against each practice, and that's what we ask you to approve in the performance management stuff. So you wouldn't need to do anything with the performers' access to PCSE Online. They should have that already themselves, either, as I said, through a personal email address or through a practice, through an NHS email address. If you've got performers in your practice that don't know their login, they can contact us. And although we're not allowed under data protection, because obviously we'd need to make sure that we were speaking to the correct person, they can contact us and say, I've not got a login, and we can go back and say, it could be try a personal email address or something. And we get this quite a lot, and we'll say, try Gmail, or it's a Gmail email address. We can safely say that without giving the email address away. But then suddenly the performer's go, I know which one it is. It's this, and they log in and they can then change their email address.
I suppose that happens, like, obviously, because when we merged over to PCSE Online, we give all GPs access, but you'll find that if you've had, say, a GP that's worked at a practice for 20 years, they've had no reason in the past to even look at PCSE Online. It's only when they come to make a change that they'll go, oh, I need to do this, I don't know my email address. So, it does pop up quite a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, just maybe I think there's a bit of confusion between the two joiner forms where the GP puts theirs in for us to update the list, but then they also have the pensions joiner form that the practice does.
Yes, I've noticed the same thing in some of the questions that I've been asked. Some of the questions I've been asked on here. So they are two separate things. So the GP has to inform us about their employment details. Now, we do have a link in the system, and the link was put there as per the requirements given by the NHS at the time that we built this. However, there is some work ongoing to see, do we still need that link between the performer's employment record and the pension? Do we still need it, or do we not? So that work is ongoing. However, they are two separate things. It starts with the performer management change that the performer must do. They log in and do the performer management change to tell us. Only when that's complete can the practice then go on and do the joiner. Only when the performer management change is done. However, the moment the performer leaves the practice, you as the practice can do a leaver form whenever you need to. It's then up to the performer to then log in and do a performer management change. So although we do rely on the performer management change coming in first at the start of the process before a joiner can be done, at the end, when they want to leave, the practice has full control over that. So you can do a leaver whenever you want. It's then up to the performer to then go in and update their employment records. Now, in real life, what actually happens, although I can say that, and it sounds like a wonderful world, doesn't it? We all know that's not really where we live. So what often happens in PCSE is we'll get towards the end of the year, and we'll get towards the time when everyone has to submit their end of year certificates, and there's suddenly this huge rush on employment changes that come in because the performers logged in to PCSE Online and realised that they never submitted an employment change. And because they've never done that, you at the practices have never been able to submit a joiner form. So actually the pensions are completely off. So what they do is they then rush to complete this employment change, and they get that through. You may approve it, and then you guys at the practice will rush to get the pension in, and then that means that they can submit their type 1 and type 2 certificates. But the same things happens with leavers. So the performer will log in, and even if you guys are all over it at the practice and you've done the leaver, when the performer may log in and suddenly realise that they never told us that they'd left that practice, so they submit it later. That's never a problem as long as you guys have submitted your pensions leavers, so we're no longer collecting the contributions from you. So you can submit the leavers whenever you need to submit them. The moment that GP leaves, submit the leaver form, and PCSE will stop collecting the contributions from you. The responsibility is then to the performer to submit the performer management change to tell us that they've left the practice. Start the process, performer management change, then once that's complete, you can do the joiner. When they leave the practice, you can do the leaver immediately. It's then up to the performer to do the performer management change.
So someone's asked, if I'm a super user, does that mean I already have all the access needed? Am I right in saying no? Because obviously they'll need to assign the roles for the work that they want to do. Yeah, I thought so.
It's another really common issue that we get, and I understand it. So I want you to understand that when we do these sessions and we get these questions, we don't just take your answers and answer all your queries. We try to go back and amend our help documents to make sure we make it really, really clear for everyone on what you guys need to do. But we get that quite a lot. So we met people super users and they say, but I can't do anything. You've got to give yourselves the role. It seems really odd, but it's the policies that we have that we can't just give you out all the financial roles. We have a policy that you have to complete a form to become a super user, but then at PCSE, we're not allowed to just give you the role. You have to then go in and give yourself the necessary financial roles to be able to view what you need to view.
How long should it take for a GP's prescriber number to come through? Now, obviously, that would depend on how long it takes for the employment change to be approved. So say, for example, if the GP submits the request and it's then stuck at a practice because they don't have the correct roles in place, it's going to take quite a while for that to come through before it's actually approved, because it's not actually going anywhere. Hence why it's super, super important to have your roles in place so you're able to action the approvals as and when the GP submits them. Let's just say happy path. Julie, Lucy, Maria, this might be one for you. What's the average turnaround from BSA for the codes to come through, the prescriber number?
For the most part, it's about 2 to 3 days, dependent on how busy they are. But we usually get them back within 2 to 3 days, at the most about 5.
Yeah. So it does all depend on whether...
Yeah, it depends on volumes and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. Thanks, Julie. So I'm going to end the questions there. Please don't worry if your question's not being answered. We will try and collate all the questions. And like I say, when I do send out a follow-up email next week, we'll hope to include them all on there. It'll include lots of guidance and support materials. So it will try, obviously, we'll try and help you with your work where we can. Now, I'm also going to ask for you to provide feedback on today's session. So my colleague Kat's going to pop something in the chat, and if you could just click on the words to see if you're very satisfied, etc. And it does also provide you an opportunity to leave a comment. Please do provide any feedback on the webinar. We look at every single comment that we get. You know, we're always looking at trying to improve how we do these sessions. Appreciate you super busy at the practice, and you can't just always jump on a webinar, etc. But please do let us know how you find the sessions, what kind of materials you find useful. Do you like the user guides? Do you want more webinars? How do you think today's session went? Please just give us as much information as you can. We really appreciate that. That's all from us today. So like I say, thanks for attending, and I'm going to end the session. So thank you very much and take care.